guys, so today we are talking all about weather. I'm not going to go too much into detail about kind of the generic reality of hiking and weather, because I know most of you guys know that. Okay, but what I am going to focus on today is high altitude weather, because it is a whole nother beast, and it's something that you really should be prepared for. So first things first, anything that is considered high altitude, really we're going to talk about anything above a tree line, and tree line is different depending on what part of the world you're on. For example, tree line here in Utah is roughly 11,000 feet, but you go up to Alaska and tree line is much lower. A lot of that has to do with how cold and frigid the air is, and that's why those trees can't grow anymore and you're left with tundra. So it's just part of the natural atmosphere. But even up in Alaska, even though their tree line is a lot lower, all of their mountains still have really high prominence coming from sea level. So those mountains can still create their own weather, and just because of the nature of the harsh environment, it's kind of the same story. So it's going to encompass pretty much any part of the world. You're above tree line, this is going to apply to you. And it's good to just be prepared for any type of weather in general. I have literally been on hikes where I was getting snowed on at the summit, and then I get back to the trailhead and it's 80 degrees. And the hike down, it's not like there's a huge time difference coming down. It's a couple hours. So be prepared for any weather, especially at a high altitude. So I'm not going to focus too much on snow, just because we have a whole section for avalanche safety. So I'm going to kind of leave that on that side. But I do want to talk a lot about wind and lightning storms particularly. Okay, so first things first, when it comes to a high altitude peak, or anything with a high prominence even, this mountain behind me, you can't actually see the summit because it's back there. But it has about a 6,000 foot prominence from where I am, and I'm at the base of it. So these mountains here do create their own weather because they are so immediately high from the valley floor. Storm clouds get pushed up, rain and lightning come out of them, snow, hail, you name it. Like, it creates some crazy stuff. So the same thing happens in Colorado, in the Rockies, up in the Canadian Rockies, in the Himalayas, anywhere, okay? Anywhere in the world with high prominence peaks, anything over 2,000 meters or about 6,000 feet is going to be enough prominence to really push the clouds up high enough that they're going to create a disturbance. So when the mountains are literally creating their own weather, sorry, random people biking by. All right, so when the mountains are literally creating their own weather, that's where it can get unpredictable, and so you want to be prepared for that unpredictability. The first issue, of course, is severe thunderstorms. They happen all the time in these cases. There is a particular lightning pose you can get into, which I will show you. I'll have a picture on here for you guys, don't worry. But lightning pose is for a reason. If you ever catch yourself in a storm and there's not a good spot to shelter yourself, that's when you just try to get as low as you can and you squat down with your heels together and you just wait it out. Severe thunderstorms can come with crazy wind as well as hail, whole bunch of other stuff. Sometimes it can even snow with the lightning, so you never know. You want to be prepared for that unpredictability. That's the reality. The other big thing I want to talk about is wind. Wind can happen with a severe thunderstorm, of course, but it can also happen on its own, and it can happen with snowstorms, and even on a clear day, but it can blow snow, and blowing snow is another huge issue. Again, I'm not going to go into the avalanche issues that can come with windy blown snow, but when it comes to hiking in really windy conditions, people have literally been blown off the mountainside before. Any of you who have ever heard of Alan Arnett, he is a Colorado local. He's climbed K2, he's climbed Everest, he's climbed a bunch of different stuff. I don't think he's completed all the 7 summits, but he's a pretty well-known mountaineer, and he has a blog and everything, and he was climbing Twin Peaks in Estes Park, Colorado, in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is a well-known peak, and it's steep prominence and not really a hard climb. It's still a hike. It's a class 2 hike with just a teeny bit of scrambling at the top. And it was so windy that day that it literally knocked him over and he broke his leg and was out of commission. We have some local skiers here that I follow on YouTube, and they were climbing Mount Hood and Mount St. Helens. They went on kind of a dual volcano ski trip, and as they were climbing up Mount St. Helens, they were literally getting blown over. And so wind can be strong enough to knock you down. I think a lot of us don't think that, like, we see it in cartoons and we're like, that'll never happen to us. But when you're on a ridge, like, think about a knife ridge or just a really exposed part of a trail, and you're not prepared for that wind, like, that can be life or death right there. So always be aware of the wind conditions, especially at high altitude, and especially if you're going to be on some exposed trail and in some exposed conditions, because that can make a big difference. And it might also make you feel safer knowing that you're climbing on a day where there's little to no wind versus on a day where it's supposed to be really windy. You might get up there in the wind and realize, oh God, like, I'm gonna die. I don't want to be in this. I don't want to be here. So wind is a big deal. It may not seem like it, but it is. So between severe thunderstorms, between wind, between varying conditions, okay, moral of the story is be prepared for everything. Depending on the time of year, I do hike with a number of layers. This is the time of year in Utah. Right now it's spring, where it can literally snow one day and be 90 degrees the next. So right now, most of our peaks, I don't know if you can kind of see in the background there, the light is kind of, yep. So over here, it's hard to point on camera. This is Broad Fork Twin. It's still got plenty of snow on it. In fact, much of the canyon still has plenty of snow, but down here it's dry. And yesterday it was 85 degrees, but today it was kind of rainy and kind of cold. So things can change in a flash. In more remote places of the world too, think about the Himalayas, things can change instantly. Those mountains are so high that they really do create very much of their own weather. And if you're on a trek or on a climb in the Himalayas, you will be coming with literally every layer of gear possible. And I'll talk more about that later. So be aware of your surroundings, be aware of the weather, and watch for those things as you're climbing too. You always want to be constantly reevaluating the conditions. My last piece of advice when it comes to that and evaluating your conditions is don't be afraid to turn around. I know sometimes it sucks, but the mountain will always be there. Some of the scariest moments I've been in were moments that I wish I had turned around. You want to be below the trees before the rain hits. And so you always want to time your climbs. If you know that, like, certain areas are prone to afternoon thunderstorms, which is very common in places like Colorado and Montana and Wyoming, and even here in Utah, and places that just have high peaks like this in the summer, afternoon thunderstorms are very, very common. The ground heats up, produces that moisture, gets pushed up to the peaks, gets a little disturbed, and then it comes crashing down, right? So be prepared.